Welcome to our Nirvana Day service. Today we are very fortunate to have Dr. Kent Matsuda to give today's Dharma message. Nirvana Day is a Buddhist holiday that commemorates Buddha's death and his entry into Nirvana when he was 80 years old. It is a time to reflect upon impermanence and the Buddhist teachings. We will now have a meditation reading. This meditation comes from a Japanese sutra entitled Yo-Hyo-Gyo, which is also known as the Sutra of Buddha's Last Instruction. Please place your hands together in Gassho. After I am gone, you, my disciples, shall hand the law down to your disciples and practice it. Then the spiritual body of Buddha will never leave the world. There is nothing eternal in the world. We have met, therefore we must part. Never mourn my departure. This is the real state of the world. Make haste to work out your own salvation. Destroy the darkness of ignorance with the light of wisdom. Namo Amida Butsu.
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 Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Please rise for our opening gatha. It's in the purple book, page 168, the teachings of all Buddhists, and remain standing for the reading of the Threefold Refuge. So page 168. The threefold refuge found on page 10. Difficult is it to receive a human form? Now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the Dharma of the Buddha? Now we hear it. If we do not cross over to the truth in the present life, in what life shall we cross over? Let us with sincerity and true reverence take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in Buddha. May we together with all sentient beings awaken to the great way of enlightenment and to the unsurpassed intent of Buddha. I take refuge in Dharma. May we together with all sentient beings enter the storehouse of Dharma, becoming like the wisdom ocean. I take refuge in Sangha. May we together with all sentient beings become unison in true accord, in harmony with all things. The peerless, profound, and wondrous Dharma is where to encounter even in many hundreds and thousands of kalpas. Now we are privileged to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. At this time, our minister's assistant, George Dow, will present a dedication, and then he will lead us in sutra chanting. Today's sutra will be Jusei Ge, found on page 93 of the Purple Book.
Today we honor the passing into Nirvana without residue by the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni. We hold that the greatest of all of his teachings was the teaching of infinite compassion and infinite wisdom from Amida Buddha. I affirm my faith in Amida's infinite wisdom and compassion. Reciting the sacred name, I shall live with strength and joy. I shall look to Amida's guiding light. As I reflect upon my imperfect self, I live with gratitude for the perfect compassion which surrounds me at all times. I shall follow Amida's teachings, and I shall understand the right path and resolve to spread the true teachings. I rejoice in Amida's wisdom and compassion. I shall respect and help my fellow beings and work for the good of my community. 説阿弥陀経流星芸我言調整願一心無常四難不満足聖無常生願なお無量無霊大聖主不再生命聖無常生願なし成仏の妙正常事故不教義正門聖無常生願利欲緊少年上映修本業四愚無常道一生天人師人力連大法不生無才能頂上三愚用交際集約難愛一永遠滅死根本永続小悪道通達全集門放送上満足非要老事法日月集中期健康音符源一種解放像法制空力法情報大集中成功死死苦不良一切物無足習得本安寧出上満六位三大用妙仏無限死通達に不詳感覚へに老子最小尊四難若果大聖を感動大愚小天大愚神妙
At this time, Dr. Kent will present the Dharma talk.
Good afternoon. So, I have a PowerPoint presentation that I started last night, and since I don't have the right cords, you're not going to see it. So, it wasn't very good anyway, so just as well that you didn't see it. And since I'd never done one before, it didn't turn out as good as I wanted to. But today we are observing Nirvana Day, and if you will please join me in Gassho. These are reported to be the last words of Shakyamuni Buddha prior to his death. After I leave this world, make the Dharma your place of refuge. Make of yourself a light. All things in this world are impermanent. Follow the Dharma diligently. Namo Amida. Namo Amida. Namo Amida. Namo Amida. So, Shakyamuni Buddha, or Prince Siddhartha, as he was named when he was born sometime in the 5th or 6th century BCE. And here you are today. So, what I'm going to talk about today is what is the connection between what happened about 2,500 years ago and your being here today. How did that happen? Well, it's a kind of an interesting story, interesting to me. After the Buddha's death, there were primarily 3 types or traditions of Buddhism that started. Around Tibet, you had Tibetan Buddhism, and eventually Buddhism traveled into China, into Korea, into Japan, and there was another branch that traveled into Southeast Asia. The Southeast Asian tradition is known as Theravada Buddhism, and you're probably familiar with the monks who wear orange robes and pretty much lead a pretty isolated life, but pretty much are practicing Buddhist sutras and meditating. And the tradition that we follow is the 3rd tradition, not Tibetan, not Theravada, but called Mahayana Buddhism. And it has various aspects. At one point it was kind of easy to distinguish Mahayana because they said that it was the tradition that had the bodhisattvas as part of their tradition. But technically speaking, you have bodhisattvas in the other traditions too, for some respect. So that really isn't the distinguishing point. The Mahayana tradition that was in India, traveled to China, traveled to Korea, and then to Japan, pretty much is the tradition that we follow. We are in the Mahayana tradition. And when Shinran Shonin, our founder, whose image is on the left-hand side of the altar, when he was in the monasteries at Mount Hiei, he was originally a Tendai monk. He was following the Tendai tradition. But after 20 years of being on Mount Hiei, he realized that he was no closer to being enlightened than pretty much the day he entered. And that, believe it or not, is the goal of every Buddhist, is to become enlightened. Believe it or not, that's your goal too. We talk about that primarily when we have our funerals, but that is the goal of every single Buddhist, regardless of the tradition that you're in. Shinran Shonin touted the Nembutsu path as a way of achieving enlightenment, and his school that eventually he founded is what we call the Pure Land path. In particular, it is the other power Nembutsu path. And I'm not going to go into all the details about that, but that will be a subject for another talk. The Jodo Shinshu tradition in Japan started pretty much after Shinran Shonin's death by his daughter Takushimi. And she is the one that helped to establish his gravesite, and eventually it became much more elaborate. And to this day, it is now the mausoleum that's in Kyoto that supposedly has his ashes in it. And if you want to, when you pass away, you can have your ashes sent to Japan, and they can be intermingled, shall we say, with Shinran Shonin's. And starting with Takushimi, there have been a line of succession of essentially family members who took over the role of what we now call the Gomonchu, or the head of the church. And interestingly enough, in Jodo Shinshu, all of the heads of the church are in the same family, supposedly. There was this potential break in tradition where it was there was a family conflict, in which case one individual kind of split off from our tradition and started another one, shall we say. So there are actually two Jodo Shinshu sects in Japan. One is called the Nishihon Ganji, which is our sect, and the other one's called the Higashihon Ganji. And the only difference between the two, really, is not so much the doctrine, not so much the teachings, but everything is kind of reversed. So in your altar, you don't have Shinran on the right-hand side, he's on the left-hand side. Our wisteria that you see down here, their design is something that goes upward. So pretty much there's a lot, and the way they chant is really kind of unusual. It's a little bit more freeform, and it's really fast. So it's very, and when you see them setting up their altar in our tradition, Nishihon Ganji in Kyoto, it's very elaborate. What the minister's assistants and the aides and everybody do to the altar to get it ready for a service. They're not so structured, and they light the candles, they put stuff out and say, yeah, that looks good. So there's a definite difference. But as far as the doctrine and the teachings, they're very, very similar. And in this country, we do have the Nishihon Ganji temples like ours, and you have the Higashihon Ganji temples, which there's one in Los Angeles, one in Berkeley, and there really isn't a whole lot of difference between the two. But in this country, there are a lot more of the Nishihon Ganji temples like ours versus the Higashihon Ganji temples. In the late 1800s, ministers from Japan started to go to Hawaii and started churches there. And on the mainland here, it took about 10 additional years before ministers from Japan started coming to the United States. to the continental United States. So the people in San Francisco kind of started the process of trying to organize a church. And they, around 1899, sent a letter to the head temple in Kyoto, the Honganji, and part of their letter said the following: "For those of us living in the United States, there is no possibility of basking in the compassionate life of the Buddha. Not only are we unable to hear about the Buddha Dharma in general, we are cut off from enlightenment through the teaching of Jodo Shinshu. Thus, we are unable to understand and appreciate the heart and mind of Shinran Shonin. How we lament at such a state of affairs. Who would not lament? In the 8 directions are non-Buddhist forces surrounding the Japanese Buddhists, and we cannot be at ease. It is as if we were sitting on the point of a pin. No matter how we move, we will be pricked. Our burning desire to hear the teachings is about to explode from every pore in our body." This letter is somewhat well known for the people who are in the Buddhist Church of San Francisco. And after that letter was sent to the Honganji in Kyoto, they did send 2 ministers from Japan to San Francisco. Their names were Reverend Sonoda and Reverend Nishijima. And when they arrived, it's hard to see, but in the 75th anniversary book of the BCA, they actually have reprinted the picture that showed up in the Chronicle when the 2 ministers showed up. And the heading says, "2 representatives of the ancient creed are in San Francisco to proselytize." So that was big news back then. They didn't stay around for a real long time, but they, Reverend Sonoda, actually went to Mexico, went to Europe, and so he was actually pretty well known in the Honganji in Kyoto. He was fairly well educated, and he didn't come back to the United States for about 10 years or so. The other minister that came, Reverend Nishijima, actually eventually went to medical school. So, kind of interesting. Nonetheless, from that time, ministers started to come to the United States to help establish temples, help establish churches, and start the Jodo Shinshu tradition here in this country. The Buddhist Church of San Francisco was the first Buddhist temple in the Jodo Shinshu tradition, and they were originally called, the group that they were before they started their temple, they were called the Young Men's Buddhist Association. And other cities started to do the same, in particular Sacramento, Seattle, and Fresno. And so those are all the first 2 temples that were established in this country. Once the ministers from Japan came and started to establish temples here in the United States, they started a organization that kind of links all the Jodo Shinshu temples together. Originally, they were called the Buddhist Mission of North America. And if you go down to the Buddhist Church of San Francisco, you'll see this metal thing near their front door that says just that. This is the Buddhist Mission of North America. And in around 1934, I forget what year, 33 or 32, when they had the World's Fair in Chicago, and the Japan Pavilion was brought over from Japan, and after the World's Fair was over, they approached representatives from the Buddhist Mission of North America and said, would you like to use some of our buildings for any of your temples? And one of those buildings is this one. So it was brought over by rail from Chicago all the way here. There used to be a rail line across the street. It's not there anymore, but that was how they brought over all the stuff from that particular building and turned it into this building. So this building is pretty old. It was never meant to be a permanent building. It was just part of the World's Fair, and obviously those buildings were pretty much just temporary there for show, and once the World's Fair is over, you tear it down and you're done. But we were able to get this building, and so it is obviously still standing today. In 1934 is when we officially started services here at Enmanji, and at the time Bishop Masuyama was the bishop, and our original name was the Sonoma County branch of the Buddhist Church of San Francisco. And then in 1934, when we had our own building, that's when we became Enmanji. And Enmanji is the name that you see above the door when you walk into this building. The people that named this temple had it such that it can be read as Enmanji when you read it one way. If you read it the other way, it reads as Sonomatera. So they use the word Sonoma in the name, and if you read it one way, that's how it's read. You read it the other way, it's Enmanji. So we started here in 1934, and the war broke out afterwards, and everybody that was a Japanese American or Japanese descent here in Sonoma County was pretty much interned in Amachi in Colorado. But it was in the internment camps that the name Buddhist Mission of North America was changed. They had a meeting at the Topaz camp, and they decided they were going to rename the organization the Buddhist Churches of America. They intentionally did not say Buddhist Temples of America. They said Buddhist Churches of America because they wanted to sound a little less foreign. They wanted to kind of blend in a little bit better to the rest of the country. And so they used the term Buddhist Churches of America. And in Canada, they used to be called the Buddhist Churches of Canada. But several years ago, they thought they didn't want to use the word church anymore. So the Canadians changed their national organization to the Jodo Shinshu Buddhist Temples of Canada, which is correct, but doesn't. It was much easier when they were called the Buddhist Churches of Canada. Nonetheless, you might think, well, someday we'll probably change it to the Buddhist Temples of America instead of the Buddhist Churches of America. That probably would have taken place had it not been for this gentleman down near San Diego who had a will, and he had no family, but, he actually had a family, but he didn't have any children. And he wrote a will that said, I leave everything to the Buddhist church. And there was no Buddhist church near where he lived. And it took several years, but when we found that particular will, the Buddhist Churches of America went to court and said, he's talking about our organization, and they won. So they got quite a bit of money from that particular individual who nobody knows. We have no idea why he wrote that, but there is an advantage to calling yourself a church sometimes when you're actually of the Jodo Shinshu tradition. So in the Topaz camp is when they use the term Buddhist Churches of America, and we use that term even to this day. The continental United States is divided into what are called 8 districts. And we here at Enmanji are part of what's called the Bay District. We are the smallest district in the country, and we are the 9 temples that you're probably familiar with. Alameda, where Reverend Fujimoto comes from, Berkeley, Marin, which is in Mill Valley, ours, Enmanji here, Oakland, Palo Alto, San Francisco, San Mateo, and what they call Southern Alameda County in Union City. So those 9 temples are what we call Bay District. And so when you hear the term Bay District, you're basically hearing about something that we're doing here in the area around San Francisco Bay. The other 8 districts in the BCA, or Buddhist Churches of America, are much larger. However, 5 of the districts are in California. So most of the temples are in California. The ones that aren't in California are the Northwest District, which includes Oregon and Washington, the Mountain States, which includes Colorado, and then the Eastern District, which is on the East Coast. And the Eastern District is the largest one, unlike our district, where you can get from one temple to the other within a couple of hours, and we all kind of surround the bay. In the Eastern District, there are 4 temples and what are called 2 sanghas, 2 groups of Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, but they have no temple, they just kind of meet. So those 2 sanghas and the 4 temples are all in different states. So there's only 1 per state. So the minister in New York, Reverend Rai, who we had here as a guest speaker years ago, he has to watch over the New York Buddhist Church and Seabrook in New Jersey. So being a supervising minister on the East Coast takes on a completely different meaning compared to what we do here in the Bay District. So having Reverend Fujimoto come over from Alameda, he can do that after performing a service in Alameda in the morning. Reverend Rai can't do that when he's going over to New Jersey. As I mentioned, this temple was founded and started in 1934. This is 1926. So in about 7 years, we will be having our 100th anniversary. Unfortunately, there is only one living minister who used to be a resident minister at this temple. Resident minister meaning they lived here. Anybody know who that is? Who's the only surviving resident minister? Yes, Reverend Castro, who retired from the Seattle Betsuing, still lives in Seattle. His name is on that plaque in the back, but he's the only person who is a living former resident minister. And with the recent death of Reverend Himaka, who was younger than he was, but she obviously will not be joining us for the 100th anniversary. So, will you be here for our 100th anniversary? Well, who knows? But nonetheless, we are going to have one in 2034. We don't know who's going to be here, but hopefully Reverend Castro will, hopefully you will. And that pretty much ends my talk as far as how does this temple relate to what happened after Shakyamuni Buddha died. So we still do talk about his teachings, we still teach the Buddha Dharma, our branch again being Jodo Shinshu in the Mahayana tradition. And hopefully someday you may get to see the head temple, the mother temple, the Honganji in Kyoto. It's a very large complex. There are 2 big buildings there. One is just dedicated to Amida Buddha, and one is dedicated to Shinran Shonin. And one other thing, the image you see inside the altar is not Shakyamuni Buddha. That is a representation of Amida Buddha. Shakyamuni, we say that Shakyamuni Buddha was a manifestation of Amida Buddha, who was around many, many, many years before Shakyamuni Buddha. And we describe Amida Buddha as being infinite light, infinite life. And we use terms where it's a little difficult to say, well, what does that look like? But when Shakyamuni Buddha came, we say, aha, this person is the manifestation of Amida Buddha. You can now see in human form what a Buddha looks like, even though technically speaking, Amida Buddha has no form and is more of a concept than an individual. So if you notice in the Buddhist temple of Marin, they don't have a picture, they don't have a statue, it just says Namo Amida Butsu on it. And technically that is the most Jodo Shinchu, or most correct way of having a central image on the altar. The next preferred one is like what we have, a scroll, and the one that is supposed to be the least representative of Jodo Shinchu is the statue, but most people have a statue. We would have had a statue if we accepted Reverend Taniguchi's offer, but since he can't do that anymore, so we will probably remain with the scroll here. Hopefully nothing will ever happen to it. And hopefully you'll all be able to join us when we have our 100th anniversary. I have no idea what we're going to do for that celebration, but it should be good. There'll be food, yes, yes. So with that, hopefully you get a better idea when I'm talking about BCA, what we're talking about, when I'm talking about Bay District, what we're talking about, the fact that, yes, we are Jodo Shinshu, which is one of the larger denominations of Buddhism in Japan. But they, like us, are currently having a lot of problems with temples closing, more people moving to the larger cities, not so much in the rural areas. So sometimes there are some years where they can be closing potentially 10s, 20s, 30s, 50s of temples just because there just aren't any people out there anymore, and fewer ministers too. But hopefully we will be able to do like we did last year, and we can increase our membership. For those of you who were able to see any of the BCA workshops yesterday on Zoom, they did talk about how to be able to grow your temples. They also talked about how to greet people, be kind of warm and welcoming Sangha. I think we are, but maybe we can do a better job. And they talked about ways of trying to increase your membership. Unfortunately, if we don't increase our membership, we're just going to continue to get smaller and smaller. And like some of the temples in Japan, you'll be there for show. It'll be a nice looking building, but no one actually uses it for a temple or a church anymore, which is an unfortunate situation. So I'm going to stop here, and let me have you join me in Gassho again. And I know I had it somewhere. Yes, here we go. All things in this world are impermanent. Follow the Dharma diligently. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you. So, the gatha that we're going to sing is in the purple book. I'm sorry, in the brown book. It is on page 116. It is Hotoke-sama. And if you will all stand.
I'm going to get a chance to thank Dr. Kent for his presentation and all the historical information. He did say to me that there will be a test and we will not be able to have any refreshments unless okay, so I know everybody paid attention. Okay. Do we have any announcements?
I would just like to remind everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'd like to just remind everyone, is it next week or that we're having cleanup?
22nd, 2 Sundays now.
Okay, Sunday the 22nd, we will have a church cleanup, so if everybody could come and help, we'd appreciate it. And then in March, we're having the Chow Man, and BWA will be hitting the bake sales, and we're going to have a raffle. So if anybody would like to donate a raffle prize, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, and that cleanup 2 Sundays from now, that starts at 10 o'clock in the morning for those who could come. Okay, if there are no other announcements, I'd like to thank Dr. Kent again for our message. Thank you to George Stout for setting up the Enmanji, bringing the Kansho and leading us with the sutra chanting. Thank you again, Dr. Kent, for playing the organ. To the February Toban for the flowers of offerings. Thank you, Tai Long, for the videotaping. Light refreshments will be served in the hall. If you have not had a chance to offer incense, you are invited to do so before leaving the temple. Thank you again for attending today's service. Thank you.